Greetings everyone. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is June Allen and I am the founder of the Art of Greatness at juneallen.net. So I am a racial trauma therapist, I'm a speaker, writer, retreat facilitator. I'm also in 12-step recovery and I love what I do. So today I've never done this before in terms of my live streams and stuff. But today I wanted to share my thoughts and reactions to a video that I watched on Oprah where she's talking about estrangement. I'm sure there's loads of you that have seen this video, but I just wanted to share my thoughts on it. There was a lot of emotions that came up around it. There's a lot of things that I thought that were missed, things that I thought were yeah, I just wanted to share my thoughts on it because there was a lot going on in that video. And I feel like it's appropriate at the moment because obviously Christmas is just round the corner. So the idea of estrangement and the holidays, it's a very emotionally charged time. And I have a lot of clients that are in this situation that are estranged from family members. Oh, excuse me. Excuse me. Sorry about that. I have a lot of clients that are estranged from family members. So I know that this is going to not only be helpful to them, but it's also helpful for people that are thinking about, going low contact with family members, or people that are in a very difficult situation with family members and are not really sure what to do. And for those of you that are already no contact or whatever, this is going to be an opportunity for you to really review where you are with it. Not from within the context of you necessarily having to go back into that situation, but just checking in with yourself, how you're feeling about it. Is there any other support that you need? Is there anything that you could be doing differently to take care of yourself? And sometimes it's just the validation that actually the decision that you've made is the right choice for you. Okay. So, yeah, I wrote down a whole load of notes. I wrote down a whole load of notes. So I'm literally just going to talk about the bullet points and the notes that I've written. So first and foremost, I wanted to say that, Oprah opens the show and she talks about this somehow estrangement being some sort of trend. Okay. And it's not a trend. Okay. This is not a trend. The only difference is that there's a lot more people talking about it. There's a lot more people talking about it in on social media, as an example. There's a lot more people talking about it on social media. And so yeah, this is really, really important because um, we're just now beginning to understand that there's a lot of people that are in pain around this stuff, and there's a lot of people um, that need support. Okay, when it comes to family estrangement, and there's a lot of people that are ashamed as well. There's a lot of people that are ashamed about having the conversation. And as black people in particular as well, this is another reason why I wanted to do this video, because I really wanted to talk about it within the context of what it means for us as black people, because we already have a lot on our plate already, having to deal with oppression, intergenerational trauma, racism, all that. We've already got all that stuff to deal with already. Okay, so having to deal with the concept, of not being in contact with your family members and stuff like that. It's an added layer of complexity that is already being added to an already strained situation. Okay. So yeah, the whole idea of this thing being a trend, okay, it's not a trend. It's something that's been going on for a long time. And for all of the years that I've been doing this work as a therapist in recovery, all of that kind of stuff, this conversation is not uncommon. It happens all the time. It's just that people aren't talking about it, okay? Because of the complexities that come with it, especially for black people, because there's a lot of times people are shamed for it, gaslit, and so it's I suppose it's also there's a lot of shaming going on because there's this thing of, we need to stick together. We need to stick together as a community. We need to stick together as black people because of what the system is already doing to us. And that somehow, black people that are choosing to estrange from their parents are somehow being disloyal, to the community and being somehow acting, almost kind of like, I suppose, they're demonizing it because we need to stick together in order to fight the system. But I have a completely different view on this, and obviously the things that I hear in my therapy, in the therapy room, are these people that are making these decisions are, they're well justified. And those of you that have been, that have been following me for a long time know that I've also been estranged from my family, for quite a long time. It was probably about 15 years now. There's been a couple of times where I've kind of gone back, when my dad was unwell and stuff like that. And then he passed before we went into lockdown. So I was kind of reconnected, with my family then very briefly, but then, it became clear very quickly that, my boundaries were not going to be respected and things hadn't really been any different. So I knew that for my own well-being, I had to remove myself from the situation. So these are not easy decisions, and I'll go more into that. I'll share, my own personal experience of what's happened and stuff like that as time goes on. So yeah, I think the thing is, the thing that came up for me as well when I was thinking of watching this Oprah show as well is that for a lot of us as Black people, we're the first generation, okay, of people, with the first generation of adult children that are going to therapy, that are making decisions that don't work for us, that are even training as therapists. We're the first generation of adult children that are starting to explore these things in a lot more detail. We are doing a lot more healing work. We have more access to things like therapy and recovery meetings, recovery groups. And because of the rise in social media and stuff like that, there's a lot more psychoeducation out there. So a lot of us are beginning to realize that actually all of this stuff that I've been dealing with, number one, they realize that they're not on their own, and number two, they realize that actually it's been quite traumatizing, you know? And so, it's been very difficult for a lot of people to do this work because it's almost like unheard of in our generation. But this is the reason why, another layer of why it feels so difficult in our community, because we're the first generation of people that are really starting to make these decisions and actually being a lot more vocal about it. A lot of people that I work with, both in recovery, in therapy, and stuff like that. They're not willing to go and keep their mouth quiet and go and sit down and break bread with family members when other abusive family members are sitting in the same room as them. They're not willing to put up with that. They're not willing to go and sit down with parents that have clearly been abusive to them for various types of abuse, and not wanting to take any accountability for it. That they're not willing to sit down and just put up with ignoring everything. And the thing is as well, that happens what this is what happens as well when you're on the healing journey, when you're in therapy, when you're in recovery, when you really start to take responsibility for your own life. Okay, it's very difficult to tolerate environments, people, situations, systems where you are required to lie and enable other people's dysfunctional behavior. When you start to tell the truth to yourself, it's very difficult to sit in situations where the expectation is that you're supposed to lie or deny how you're feeling about things. It becomes more impossible and more painful to do that. So that's another reason why a lot of people are removing themselves from these situations, because they're not willing to abandon themselves. Okay, they're not willing to abandon themselves in environments that require them to lie about who they are, or to not be heard, or to keep silent because there's other to keep the peace. People are not willing to do that anymore. And if we're really going to break these generational patterns, there has to be a line drawn in the sand. There has to be a line drawn in the sand if you want to break these generational patterns. So I think that, these conversations are really, really important, because, we need to know that we're not alone. people that are choosing, adult children that are choosing to make these decisions, they need to know that they're not alone. They need community because it can be very, very isolating for people that are making these decisions. And I always say to my clients, like, when you're making these decisions to do these things, it's even more difficult to actually to estrange yourself from family members when you don't have another community to attach to. When you're detaching from the dysfunction in the family system, you need another community to attach to, because otherwise you're just out here on your own. You're out here on your own, and that can be incredibly painful, because what happens is when you're estranging yourself from parents and stuff like that, it's never not just the parents. Sometimes it's often siblings, it's cousins, it's aunts, it's the whole family. Because quite often, the other family members often enable the abuser's behavior. They enable it. And so then it leaves you in a difficult position because you're not feeling heard, you're not feeling seen, you're feeling disrespected again. And the finger's kind of, 9 times out of 10, this is what I see. The finger is quite often pointed at the person that's choosing to speak up, that's choosing to not stay silent, that's choosing to distance themselves. The finger quite often is pointed at that person for speaking up, for disrupting the family dysfunction. They're the ones that are pointed out as the troublemaker, and quite often that person is the scapegoat of the family, because they don't people don't want the family system to change. They don't want to have a conversation. They don't want to talk about it. So the easiest thing to do is to point the finger at the person who's trying to go, hello, look at what's happening, look what's going on. This is not acceptable. The person that saying all that stuff and opening their mouth, okay, the finger is pointed at them as the troublemaker. Okay, the finger's pointed at them as the troublemaker, and that's how the system kind of maintains the dysfunction. Okay, but if you want these generational patterns to change, okay, sometimes estrangement is necessary. Sometimes estrangement is necessary. And just to be clear as well, I don't tell my clients that they need to estrange from anybody. The client comes into the session and they make that decision on their own, because quite often they are in so much excruciating pain after years and years and years of not being heard and not being seen and being gaslit and being scapegoated, and they're just tired. Okay, those people are tired. Okay, they're tired of the bullshit. They're tired of being invisible. They're tired of not being heard. They're tired of being gaslit. They're tired of all of that. And it gets to a point where, do you know what? I just need to surrender to the fact that it's not my responsibility to change people. Okay, it's not their responsibility to fix the dysfunction in the family. And quite often, estrangement is a last resort. Okay, this is what I see in my practice, and it was also my situation as well. There's this is kind of like this thing around, you get to a point where you just know that things are not going to change. And a lot of my clients, they're tired of constantly being re-traumatized as well. When they go back into the situation, they're trying to reconcile, and the family is just not, they're not willing to reconcile in a healthy way. That what they really want you to do is to keep your mouth shut. That's what they want. They want you to keep your mouth shut to maintain the family dysfunction, so they can carry on with their nonsense or protect whoever's doing the abusing, so that everything it can maintain the illusion that everything's okay. They maintain the lie that the family dysfunction is okay, and it's not okay. It's not okay. So, what I tend to do, what I do in session is, I create space for my clients to understand the family system, understand their role in the dysfunction, in the enabling, and how they can start to begin to tell the truth for themselves, how to take care of their nervous system, okay, that is often incredibly dysregulated, constantly dysregulated because of being in this system, being in these family environments, and validating their experience, validating their feelings, helping them to understand that actually it's not their fault, helping them to understand that there are quite often generations of intergenerational trauma. There's, in my case, there was enslavement. A lot of my clients have a history of enslavement in their past as well. So a lot of that stuff is not being healed, and then it shows up in the family dysfunction. That's how it shows up. I always say to my clients as well that, when our ancestors left the plantations, they weren't offered no therapy. They just left the plantations and were told to go and get on with it. So how do we expect, okay, how do we expect to have healthy family relational dynamics when we've still got all of that stuff from enslavement that's just been passed on? It's going to show up. It's going to show up at some level. Okay, it's going to show up in our relationships. It's going to show up in how we feel about ourselves. So if we're not doing any trauma work, if we're not in therapy, if we're not in recovery, okay, if we're not doing any self-reflection or anything like that, that self-hatred is going to play out. The internalized depression is going to play out. The misogyny is going to play out. The sexism is going to play out. The homophobia is going to play. All of that stuff is going to play out. It's going to play out. And it takes one person to make the decision that actually I'm not putting up with this crap no more. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not doing it anymore. And that person often has to make the difficult decision to distance themselves from the family in order to do their own work, because it becomes so unsafe and so psychologically dangerous, and sometimes it's physically dangerous to be around certain family members, that they have to make that decision to leave. They have to make that decision to leave. So here's the thing that always makes me really, really sad, and this is something that I also saw in the show, is that a lot of the children who estrange themselves, the adult children who estrange themselves from family members, they quite often blame themselves. There's a part of them that still believes, oh, it's my fault. It's my fault why these family members don't love me. It's my fault why my parents don't love me. But how I work with clients with this is I have to help them understand that's the younger part of them, the younger part of them that was rejected, that was abandoned, that was abused. Because when children are harmed, okay, when children are harmed in childhood, they don't blame the parent, they blame themselves. They're like, oh, well, I must have done something. I must have done something wrong. There must be something wrong with me why my parents don't love me. There must be something wrong with me why my parents keep beating me. I must have deserved it. There must be something fundamentally wrong with me because my parents keep shaming me for this, that, and the other. Okay? This is what children do. If they're not loved, they're going to blame themselves. And that is going to continue to play out and get recycled as an adult. People will grow up as an adult with those scripts still in their mind unless they make the decision to start doing the work and to unpack. Actually, I know that that's internalized. I internalized that from this parent. I internalized that from that family member. I internalized my colorism as an example. I internalized that from certain family members that were hung up about their dark skin or whatever it is. You know, as an adult, you might also understand, oh, I internalized that from the system. My hatred around my own blackness, I internalized that from the system. Okay, this is what happens in these situations with adult children. Okay, they blame themselves. They blame themselves, and quite often that's why they it takes them so long to make that decision. When children choose to estrange from their families, it's not, they don't wake up one day and go, oh, I think I'm just gonna walk away from my family. And something that really annoyed me, actually, there was some woman that was saying that, um you know children can estrange themselves from loving, from good parents. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Why an adult child would want to distance themselves or completely go no contact with a family that was loving, supportive, nourishing. Make it make sense. My experience of this, and this is something that I saw in the program as well, is that a lot of these parents that are estranged, a lot of these parents that have got children that are estranged from them, they're in denial about the impact that their behavior has had on the child. I see a lot of minimizing. I saw a lot of minimizing on that program. When the question was asked, I can't remember the exact question, but something along the lines of, well, what happened? What was the catalyst? what was the catalyst where the child actually made the decision? How did it get to that point? And some of these parents, some of them didn't disclose everything that happened, but there was quite often something that happened between the parent and the child that was kind of like the last straw. Okay, that was the last straw for the adult child. And they would disclose it and stuff like that, and they would say, and but I noticed that they just minimized it. They minimized I don't think they understand. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe they don't really understand the impact that their behavior has had on the child. The only person that I saw taking real responsibility, there was a brother on there, a black guy, and he was talking about his daughter, and she was saying about how he was a helicopter parent, and he didn't respect her boundaries and all of this kind of stuff. And I loved watching this brother, because what he was saying was, he was very open to self-reflection. He was a lot more open to self-reflection, and actually he has a really good relationship with his daughter now because of it. Okay, he has a really good relationship with his daughter now because of it, and I love that for him. And this is the reason why a lot of the adult children, especially the adult children that I work with, why they don't want to go back and reconcile with their parents, because their parents are not willing to be open to any sort of self-reflection. They're not willing to think about, actually, do you know what? I did this, and this, and this in the childhood, which, even though you might have been doing the best you can, but actually sometimes your best is not good enough. And that's not me being disrespectful. That's the reality. Sometimes you may well have done your best, okay? And both things can be true. You can have done the best that you can as a parent, and you can still have harmed your child. But the reason they don't want to spend time with you, or they don't want to repair that thing with you, is because you're not willing to do any self-reflection. What I see is a lot of parents, they want to maintain control. They want to maintain their role as a position of power. They want to weaponize their role as a parent to maintain control in the relationship. They want to maintain the power in the relationship. That's what they want to do. That's what they want to do. They don't want to apologize. They don't want to talk about their role in the breakdown of the relationship. They don't want to do that. What they want to do is they want to be right. That's what they're interested in. They want to be right. And here's the thing. In my experience, okay, as seeing all of this play out in my with my clients and stuff like that, a lot of times, and some of my clients, not some of them, all of them have had horrendous things happen to them, okay, by parents. Horrendous things happen to them. The reason they don't want to go back is because the parent, quite often, they don't want to apologize. They don't want to self-reflect. They're not interested in doing the repair work required. They think just by, and some of them, even if they just say sorry, just saying sorry is not how you repair a relationship. Let me say that. Okay? Just saying sorry is not how you repair a relationship, just by saying those words. That's not going to fly. Okay? Because quite often what I hear in the therapy rooms is that that word sorry can then also be weaponized, and they just get back to the same behavior, and then they say, oh, but I said sorry for that, but they just carry on doing the same thing. When you're apologizing to somebody, okay, that requires changed behavior. It requires you to acknowledge the harm that's been caused. It requires you to self-reflect on the impact that it's had on your child, on your adult child. You're still the parent, okay? You're still the parent. And quite often, what I see is a lot of parents, they don't want to give up that position of power. They want to cling on to that weaponization of the role of being the parent. They always want to be right. They don't want to admit that they're wrong. And quite often, I think what's underneath a lot of that is they feel ashamed. They feel ashamed about their behavior. Okay. They feel ashamed about the fact that the child doesn't want anything to do with them. Okay. So they kind of dig in their heels about being right. And they're not willing to have any type of humility to be able to say, do you know what? I did these things, at the time, this is how it was. This is why I did these things. But I'm now willing to put my hand up and say, actually, I harmed my child. I harmed my child, and and I'm going to do whatever it takes to repair the relationship with my child. But a lot of parents don't want to do that. They don't want to go to therapy. They don't want to go to therapy. Okay? They don't want to go to therapy. They don't want to have to talk. And I know there's going to be people that are probably saying, oh, well, your mum was also a victim. Your parent was also a victim. They've got their own trauma that they did. We know all that. We know all that. Okay? But two situations can be true. And it's the parents, it's the family's responsibility, okay, to do their own work if they want to repair the situation with the adult child. And if the parent, you're never too old to get a therapy, okay? I don't want to hear all that nonsense about, oh, I'm too old. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Okay? If you want to repair that relationship with your child, you will do whatever it takes. And that including going to therapy. Okay? Including going to therapy. Go to recovery, do whatever you need to do. When I talk about going into 12-step recovery as well, I want you to understand that I'm not just talking about substance abuse. I'm not just talking about drugs and alcohol. I'm also talking about relationships. There are recovery fellowships for relationships. There are recovery fellowships for dysfunctional families. Okay? There are, you name it, there is a recovery fellowship that is going to be able to support you with that. So I don't want to hear nobody coming in my DMs or emailing me about, they're too old. If you want to repair the relationship, you'll do whatever it takes. That's it. Point blank period, end of subject. A lot of people will also, what I also hear from my clients as well is that their parents will also use spirituality, okay, to maintain power. They will weaponize spirituality to maintain control over the child and to gaslight the child and to shame the child. Okay, they will do that to weaponize and to maintain the power within the power dynamic with them and their adult children. And adult children, it's not going to fly. They're not going to part with that. Okay, you can quote as many Bible scriptures as you want to. Okay, if that adult child does not feel safe in your presence, it ain't gonna happen. And your adult child is not going to want a relationship with you. You can pray as hard as you want to. Okay? You can pray as hard as you want to. Just doing that on its own is not going to make your adult child feel safe with you. You have to be willing to do the relational work required to make it happen, to make the repair happen. Okay? Repair takes two people, not just one. Something else that I see in my, from my clients is that, they feel like it's their responsibility to fix everything. And quite often, the enabling family members or whatever will also put it onto the child, the adult child, like it's their responsibility to fix everything. No, it ain't. No, it isn't. A relationship, takes two people. Okay, it takes two people. And the other thing that's really important, there was something really good that Oprah done actually, because there was one woman in there. She was saying that I think she's estranged from her daughter, but she's also got two sons. And she kept saying, "Oh, but my sons don't behave that way. My sons understand. My sons do this. My sons do that." And Oprah very rightly said to her, you know, that your daughter has a different relationship to you than the relationship is very, very different. So it's unfair to kind of put that on her. And I've heard Gabor Mate talk about this as well, which is really, really powerful. And he says something along the line, I'm paraphrasing obviously, something along the lines of each child, okay, each sibling has a different relationship with their parents because they were born at a different time. They were born at a different time. They were born at a different, the parent could have had other things going on for them at the time when that child was born. The placement where the child, the order, the birth order makes a difference. How the parent relates to the firstborn is very different to how the parent relates to the one that was born last, the youngest one. How the parent's going to relate to the middle child very differently, because the parent is going through different things. So you can't just because one sibling wasn't abused, or says that, was not impacted by the parents' behavior, it doesn't mean that the child who estranged themselves is doing something wrong, or that somehow that child, the adult child that's estranged themselves, is lying because the other sibling didn't experience doesn't have the same experience. Each child has a different experience with those parents or with their siblings, because of placement, because of where the parent is, because of what was going on, da 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 da. Even what's going on politically is different. For me personally, I was born the year Martin Luther King was murdered. Okay, 1968. My mum also, she also, I don't really know if I want to say this actually. I won't say that what I was going to say, but because I want to obviously preserve that for my mum. I'm not going to say that, but there was things going on with my mum. She was grieving. Okay. There was some stuff going on with my mum that, before she had me, which wasn't the case for my other siblings. Okay. Now I don't know the impact of these things, but there is going to be some sort of impact. Okay, there is going to be some sort of impact around that. What's happening politically, what's happening personally, what's happening in terms of the other children, what's happening in terms of the relationship with the child's father. All of these things are going to have an impact on the relationship. Okay, which means that it's important not to gaslight the siblings because they didn't have the same experience, because it isn't necessarily going to have the same experience. Okay, so that is something that's really, really important. Um, so let me just see what else I wrote down. Oh yeah, it's a very difficult conversation. It's a very, very difficult conversation. Um, there's always a reason why children leave. I see all these. I quite often see, parents of estranged children. They always come on and say, "Oh, we don't know why they feel like this. We had a loving relationship," and they're saying all of this stuff. And I'm just going to say they're in denial. Sorry if that's going to piss people off, but they're in denial. Okay, there is a reason, and quite often they know. Okay, they know, and if they do know, like I was saying in the beginning, they're minimizing it. They're minimizing the impact that it's had on that child. Okay, and they're not willing to take responsibility for the impact that it's had on that child. But 9 times out of 10, the parents know why children leave. Okay, and it's not because of what you're saying of being a so-called good parents. Children that feel safe with their parents don't leave. Okay, and let me say this as well. One of the reasons why it is so difficult for adult children to leave, okay, is because at a primal level, okay, at a primal level, there is part of us, part of our humanity, okay, the our instinct is to stay within the family unit. That is what our instinctual, our primal selves, they need us to stay in the family unit, because at some level there's a part of us that thinks that we're going to die if we don't stay in that family unit. Okay, that's one of the reasons why it's so hard to leave, because there is that primal part of us that wants to keep us connected to the family unit, because there's a part of us, and that's basically just a primal part of us trying to keep us alive. Okay, so for an adult, and this is ongoing, this primal thing. Okay, this primal attachment is ongoing. So for somebody to make the decision to want to leave the family unit, okay, to have no contact with those people, it takes an incredible amount of courage and strength to do that. So they're not gonna make that decision lightly. Okay? They're not going to make that decision lightly. Okay? So for those of you that are saying, you know, we don't know why you need to do some self-reflection, please. You need to do some self-reflection. And I know sometimes it can be hard to tell the truth. Okay? It can be hard at times to tell the truth about these things, because you don't want to feel the shame, you don't want to feel judged, You don't want to feel any of those things. So it's easy for you to maintain, to try to maintain the status quo, to try and maintain that position of power as parent and silence your adult child. But if you want a relationship with that adult child, you're gonna have to do something differently. And staying in denial ain't one of them. Okay, because your adult child is not going to feel safe with you if they don't trust you. Here's something else that people don't think about. Okay, the trust is gone. Okay, if you can't apologize, if you can't self-reflect, if you're not willing to do the repair work, if you're not willing to do it as an ongoing thing, that adult child is not going to trust you. There's no trust, and there is no relationship without trust. Okay, there is no relationship without trust, and just because you gave birth to those children, just because you and your partner created this life, it doesn't mean that you're entitled to it. You're not entitled to be in communication with them just because you gave them life. You have to earn it. You have to earn it. And if you make a mistake, if you F up, then you have to take responsibility to fix it. Okay? You have to take responsibility to fix it, to do the repair work. You have to be willing to admit that you've done something wrong. You have to admit that you effed up, even if you thought you did the best you can. You have to be willing to take responsibility for your behavior, and a lot of you don't want to. So then why are you surprised that your adult children don't want to talk to you? And it's not that they're punishing you. That's another thing that I saw in this program. These adult parents, they're in victim mode. They're playing the victim. They're playing the victim. Oh, they're trying to punish us. Oh, they didn't get their own way. No, it's not. It's just their way of trying to play the victim and demonize the adult child. They don't want to take responsibility for what they did in the, what for the harm that they caused in the relationship. There's a difference between somebody trying to punish you by being silent and an adult child trying to protect themselves from ongoing harm. They're two very different things. But because a lot of the parents, playing the victim is how they're dealing with it. That's what they're doing. They're saying that, oh, they're punishing me for this, that, and the other. And no, they're not being punished. That adult child is leaving the situation because they feel like they have no choice, and it's the last resort. It's their last attempt at trying to find peace amongst all the chaos and dysfunction that they've had to deal with. Okay? They're trying to find some peace amongst the chaos and dysfunction that they've had to deal with. That's the reason why. Okay? That is the reason why they've had to leave. You know? It's protection. They're trying to protect themselves from being harmed. Because if they continue to engage, a lot of them get re-traumatized. They become really emotionally dysregulated. And when you're constantly being dysregulated by these dynamics, it's hard to function. It's hard to function. It's hard to love yourself when you're in environments where you're not being loved, when you're not being heard, when you're not being seen, when the other person is not taking responsibility. And quite often what I see in my therapy space as well is that a lot of the adult children, they regress. Okay, they regress into their childlike selves when they're around their parents because their parents are so adamant about maintaining that position of power that their parents don't want to be in a relationship with them unless they're in their childlike, it's a child parent dynamic. Okay, when you're an adult, okay, you want to be an adult, you know, equally with your parents. And you want the same, you want to be respected, you want to be heard, you want to be treated like an adult. But a lot of these parents who are estranged, they don't want their adult children to be adults, they want them to be children. They want the dynamic, they want to maintain control, they want to be able to say and do what the hell they want without any consequences. But anybody that's on their healing journey ain't going to put up with that nonsense. They're not going to put up with that rubbish. Okay, because they need to preserve their well-being. They need to preserve their sense of self. They don't want to abandon themselves. They don't want to be disrespected. Just because they're your child, it doesn't mean that they should put up with being disrespected. Okay? Just because you gave birth to them, it doesn't mean that you have the right to disrespect them or be abusive or ignore them. You don't have the right to do that. And that is why these adult children are choosing not to have a relationship with a lot of the parents because of it. Okay? But a lot of adult parents, a lot of the parents, they don't want to hear that. So then they focus on being the victim. The child is punishing me. She's taking my grandchildren away from me. Yes, those, I had this same conversation with my mum actually. I had this same conversation with my mum around the whole fact that um she doesn't get to have a relationship with my child. And I remember saying to her, and I say this to my clients as well, if if the adult child doesn't feel safe with the parent or doesn't trust the parent for whatever reason, why would you allow your child, the most precious thing that you have, to be handed over to the person that you still don't trust? Why is that even a conversation? But for some reason, because there's they're part of the family of origin, that there's a sense of entitlement. That there's a sense of entitlement around because you gave birth to the child, then you automatically have access to the grandchildren. No, you don't. You have to earn it. Just like how I wouldn't let any stranger on the street. I wouldn't just say to my daughter, "Oh yeah, go around that person's house." I don't trust that person. Just like how I wouldn't do it for a stranger. I'm not gonna do it for family members either. Because the trust is not there. If you don't trust that person, why are you handing your children over to that person? And I remember saying this to my mum. I said, when my daughter's 18, if she chooses to get in contact with you and have a relationship with you when she's an adult, that's her business. That's up to her if she wants to do that. But while she's underage, it's my responsibility to protect her from anyone that I don't trust or anybody that I feel, might cause her harm in any way. Okay? If there's no trust, there's no relationship. That's it. End of conversation, end of subject. If there's no trust, there is no relationship, you know? And it's okay to have those boundaries. It's okay to have those boundaries. If the parent is not willing to do the repair work with you, why would you allow your child to spend time with that parent? Because then you're abandoning yourself, but then you're putting your child in a situation that could potentially be harmful. And I know this is going to maybe ruffle some feathers, and I know it's probably going to piss a few of the parents off, but this is the reality, and this is what I see in my therapy practice with clients all the time. These types of conversations that they're having, people trying to unpack stuff, clients that are feeling guilty about, that their child doesn't have a relationship with their parent and all the rest of it. And I have to just, I have to have these conversations with them. Do you trust the parent? Do you trust a parent in this moment in time? Do you trust a parent? No, they don't. So if you don't trust a parent, why would you send your child over there? And it's almost like I'm giving them permission to think about it beyond just the fact that they're related to this person and they feel obligated that they should hand over the grandchildren to the family members. You're not they're not entitled to it. Again, but this is where I see the child parent dynamics playing out. The child in them is still feeling obligated to do what the parent wants. That's the child in them thinking that they don't have a right to say no. And what I do is I help them to find the adult in them, okay, the parent in them, the sacred self inside of them, to have an adult conversation with the younger part of themselves to protect the younger part of themselves because the younger part needs parenting. And sometimes this is where the reparative conversation happens in therapy. My job as a therapist, as a racial trauma therapist, is to sometimes, lean into that reparative dynamic. I don't tell my clients what to do, but I support the choices that they make. That's what I do. I help them to understand how they feel about certain things, to get to the truth, to actually help them to find, to help them to find and be clear about how they really feel about the parent. Sometimes a lot of them feel angry, a lot of them feel guilty about feeling angry. A lot of them are just drenched in a whole load of shame that they can't shake off. So I help them to understand these parts of themselves that are often driving the dysfunctional decisions that they're making, going back into these environments because their childlike selves, the child in them, is still responding to their parent from their child self. And what I help them do is to find the adult, is to nurture the adult in them, to help them grow up, to help them learn how to parent that childlike self. So then the adult in them then gets to make the decision about whether they're going to have a relationship with the child, with the parent or not. Because in those unhealthy dynamics, it's the young part that keeps yearning to go back to the parent because of the primal stuff that I spoke about earlier, and also because there are younger parts that are yearning to have a relationship. They're in fantasy about the relationship with the parent because that helps them protect them from the pain of the reality that the relationship is dysfunctional. Okay, a lot of the youngest parts have to stay in fantasy about the relationship with their dysfunctional parent. And they keep going back, hoping that the parent is going to change, hoping that the parent is going to love them. And what I help them do in therapy is I help them unpack the truth for them. That actually, quite often, the parent has been abusive, the parent has been neglectful, the parent doesn't have the tools, the parent has got their own trauma, they're unavailable for whatever reason. And then in unpacking all of that, the child then gets to make the client then makes the decision how they move forward with this, what boundaries they need to put in place, how are they going to self-parent, what does the grief process look like, how do we work with the shame, how do we reduce the shame so they can start to build some confidence. They can start to build some confidence and give themselves permission to show up as their true selves and to let go of any responsibility that they have to mollycoddle or caretake the parents, the dysfunctional parents' emotion, because they're not responsible for that. This estrangement conversation is so layered. It's so layered. There are so many things that happen as a result of it. Um, one of the questions that also came up was, how do you deal with the longing to keep going back to the parent, the longing for, a parent that they didn't have. And, how I work with the clients again as well is to help them to find the truth. Okay, because the longing is quite often the primal stuff, the primal attachment, trying to reconnect, trying to find something that isn't there, you know. But to deal with the longing, you have to deal with the grief. You have to get honest about the fact that the parent was not available. You have to deal with the grief for the fact that that person has actually caused you harm and that they're unsafe and that honestly they can't be trusted. You have to take the parents off the pedestal. You have to take the family off the pedestal because that's one of the ways that the scapegoat is treated. That the scapegoat will quite often put the family on a pedestal and blame themselves. So the grief work and having to deal with the longing means that you have to take the family off the pedestal. You have to take the family off the pedestal, you have to take the parents off the pedestal, and you have to look at the situation really objectively. Like, this is what's happening, this is the reality, which is often not often, it is an excruciating process. Okay, it's an excruciating process, but it needs to happen in order to make choices that are healthier for the client. They have to do that in order to be able to make choices. And the family system will do whatever it takes at times to pull the adult child back into the system. Like I said, they will gaslight them. They will make them feel bad. they'll weaponize illness and stuff like that. One of the things that was really interesting, there was a nurse on there. Okay, there was a nurse on there, and she was talking about how um she worked. I can't remember the organization that she worked for, but basically what her job was to she does palliative care. Okay, and quite often she will get patients who want her to phone their estranged children and tell them that they're dying and all this kind of stuff, and she will make the phone calls. And she was saying that sometimes a lot of times the estranged children, they don't want to reconnect with the parent even when the parent is dying. And she also said, which I thought was quite which was quite interesting, she's felt that the parents that were dying were only doing this thing to call the estranged children as a way to manipulate. A lot of them weren't sorry for what they did. They weren't saying anything about wanting to make amends. There was only one parent that she's ever encountered that really wanted to make amends to the children, but the rest of them, she said that she felt that they were only doing it as a way. These people were kind of weaponizing their sickness, weaponizing their illness and stuff like that. And I hear that as well. I hear that as well, which makes it really, really difficult, really, really difficult and really, really painful for adult children to take care of themselves because, if somebody's not very well or if somebody's, dying and stuff like that, then, it's going to have a different, the guilt and the shame and all of that kind of stuff can then get triggered in the adult child, and then they can get sucked back into this situation, that actually could cause them more harm you know and so this is not a conversation where you can put a tick list on all of the answers that are going to make these things work. It's very complex, and it's very different for different clients, and it's going to the impact and the choices that need to be made, the boundaries that need to be are so individual. There is no one and done thing with these situations. This is why it requires a lot of conversations, a lot of unpacking, a lot of grief work. And ultimately, the adult child needs to feel like they have autonomy over their life. They need to feel like they have autonomy over their life because they've felt so powerless often inside the family system. And the adult child needs to make the decision that's right for them. And it's not always what the estranged the family that's being estranged are quite often annoyed, they're angry, they're pissed because because the person that the adult child who's chosen to step away is not kind of getting in line is not getting in line the way that they want them to. They expect them to shut up and just do as they're told or whatever it is. So again, it's a complex situation. It's a very, very complex situation. I love the fact that there was a black therapist on there, and she was saying about how people can birth a child but not parent them, and I really I love that they can birth a child but not parent them. Okay, anybody can give birth to a child, but to actually be a mother or father or whatever, a carer, it's a very different conversation. There's not always the nurturing. And I always say this to people as well, people that are estranged from their families, I always say to them to think about who you have these types of conversations with, because I hear so many times, all the time, where people that are estranged have conversations with other people about it. There's always oh, well, you've only got one mom, you've only got one family, that's your blood, all this kind of stuff. Life is too short. I hear this all the time. I hear this all the time, and it's a way of gaslighting, making them, it's guilt tripping, all of this stuff. But then I always say to them, well, actually, life is too short also to be in environments or around people that cause you harm. Okay, so when people tell you life is too short, just kind of suck it up and get on with it. No, life is also too short to be around people that don't respect you. Life is too short to be around people that you don't trust. Life is too short to be keeping secrets and enabling people's dysfunctional behavior. Okay, your peace and your feelings and your emotions and your experience is just as important, is valid. Okay, you deserve to be heard, you deserve to be seen. Okay, and you deserve to protect yourself if you need to. Okay, you deserve to protect yourself if you need to. And just some things that I just say to the parents of estranged children. At the end of the day, you chose to have these children and you raised them. Okay, you raised these children. Yes, they're adults now and they can take responsibility for themselves. Okay, but you raised them. There are choices that you've made, okay, that have contributed to who they are as adults. And that's not saying that, these adult children are they can't take some sort of responsibility. Yes, it's their responsibility to do the healing work for themselves as adults. Yes. But when we think about, this is what psychodynamic theory is. What I do with when I work with clients in a psychodynamic way, that means I look at the past, I look at the childhood, I look at the family dynamics, I look at the family systems, I look at the cultural context, I look at the ancestral situation. I look at is there enslavement and colonization or whatever? How has that played a role in the family? I look at all of these things for the adult children to be able to make a decision about how they want to live their lives. But at the end of the day, if you're an estranged parent, you have to take responsibility for the fact that you raised them. Okay. And you have to be willing to look at what you did, at how you parented, that has contributed to that person making the difficult decision to leave the family unit. And if you're not willing to do that, I can't help you. You can't expect your adult child to want to have a relationship with you when you've made choices that have caused harm, even if you've done the best that you could. Both can be true. You can have done the best you could and you've caused harm to your child. Are you willing to self-reflect on that? There are too many parents out here that are dismissive and minimizing the fact that they physically abuse their children under the guise of discipline. Okay, and don't want to take any responsibility for the impact that that's had on your child. And yes, people put it under, oh well, that's what we did in that time. And there's a lot of black parents out there that hit their children. That doesn't mean that it's okay. It's not okay. It's not okay. Okay, I've had conversations with clients where their parents did not protect them from other family members that SA'd them. They're still expected to show up at family dinners. They're still expected to show up at Christmas. They're still expected to show up at Thanksgiving. The people that have been doing the abusing have been protected by the other adults in the family, but yet you want your adult child to come and have a relationship with you where you can protect them. And even now, you're still minimizing it. Oh, that was a long time ago. Oh, you have to forgive them. Really? Really? You want your adult child to come and sit down and break bread with all the family members when you didn't protect them and you did not hear them and you did not take responsibility. You didn't protect your children, but yet you want your adult child to come and sit with you and break bread. They're not going to. If you want to protect the abusers in your family that have done that, then you sit down and break bread with them, but don't expect your adult children to do it because they ain't going to. They're not going to. And that whole conversation is a topic in of itself. But I hear that so much in my therapy chair, where parents, dysfunctional parents, have protected their abusers. They've protected their abusers over their own children. The child is just supposed to keep quiet and don't say nothing. And in some cases they've carried on relationships with they've carried on relationships with people that have actually harmed their children. Rather than kicking the person out and calling them out and cussing them out, they've stayed in relationships with those people rather than protect the child. They've carried on bringing their children to these environments where that have harmed their children. They've not called out the family members or done anything. They haven't said anything to the child about how they feel about what they haven't done none of that. But yet that you still want your adult child to come and break bread with you. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It is not going to happen. There's a different generation of adults now that are in therapy, that are committed to breaking the patterns in the family, that are committed to protecting their children. And they don't want a relationship with you because unfortunately you can't be trusted. And I know that's a lot to hear. And I'm not being judgmental either. I'm just telling you the truth about what I see in in the people that come and sit in my therapy chair. I'm saying these things to you, okay? Because if you really want a relationship with your child, I am letting you know, okay, that it's going to take work for you to repair the relationship with that. But you've got to do your part. And you have to let go of this whole thing of, oh, well, because I'm the parent, then by default you're in the right, or by default you're the one in the position of power. No, you're not, because at the end of the day, your position, your pride around not wanting to apologize and be humble about the fact that you've contributed to the dysfunction in that relationship means that you don't get to have a relationship with your children. So you pick a side. Pick a side. Pick a side. Do you want the relationship with your adult child or not? Do you want a relationship with your adult child or not? Or is the pride and being right and all the rest of it, is that more important to you? Or trying to save face somehow? Okay. So I'm just gonna wrap. I know it's been a huge topic of conversation. It's been a huge topic of conversation, but I really wanted to have this conversation because, again, watching the Oprah estrangement video was just brought up a lot. It just brought up a lot, and I really wanted to have this conversation with you so that, if you are an adult child, I wanted you to feel heard. I wanted you to feel seen. I wanted you to know that in the black community, yes, it's a lot more common than what we think, okay? And that there is support out there. If you are estranged, okay, and you are looking for a therapist, and you can email me, info@yardofgreatness.com. We can have a conversation. Excuse me, we can have a conversation about it. We can begin to unpack the trauma, the challenges, the shame, the rage, all of those things, the grief. We can talk about all of those things. Okay? Email me if you're estranged from your family and you're looking for a safe space to be able to have that conversation. Okay? I'm just looking to see if there's anything else on my I think that's it actually in terms of my notes. Yeah, I think I pretty much covered everything. If you're a parent as well who's estranged, okay, and you're looking for support around this, you can also email me. Okay, we can unpack it. I will help with you. I will help you and sit with you as you uncover the truth, okay, about your parenting. If you've got blind spots around your parenting that you think should, oh, but it should have been okay. I did the best. I've done the ABs. I can maybe open up your mind, okay, to think about reflecting on what are the things, what are the reasons, what are the possible reasons, how did you contribute to the breakdown in the relationship with your adult child, and what can you do? It might be that that your child doesn't want to see you. It might be that you might not have a relationship with your child again because the child doesn't want to forgive you and the child just doesn't trust you, and that's it. So if that's the case, then we focus on your grief work. We focus on your estrangement grief. Okay? So you're going to learn you can still take responsibility for yourself And this is the process then becomes about self-forgiveness. Taking ownership of what you did wrong, it then becomes about self-forgiveness and thinking about what you can do. If your adult child doesn't want to have a relationship with you anymore, there's some stuff that you can do with the rest of your family that can help to repair the situation. Okay? So you can email me as well. If you feel like if you if you want to have that conversation, then we can have that conversation as well. Okay? Thank you so much for joining me. I know it's been a hard conversation today, but it's one that's needed in our community. Okay. Um, yeah, if you've got any other questions or anything about anything that I've shared today, email me info@yardofgreatness.com and I will be happy to support you in answering questions, not specific to your situation, but about working with me. Okay, generally. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time. Take care, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.